Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling, and I'm your host. Well, with the federal government flying around the country promising everybody more millions of dollars that we don't have, I think that shines a real light on the current budget that they're trying to push through, and how the first three sections of the budget are totally and completely about taxation, whether it be cigarettes and vaping, or whether it be capital gains, Airbnb, or giving tax breaks to the media companies. That's in there, giving tax breaks to certain companies that own lots of houses that want to put employees in there, which only exists if you're bringing employees in from other countries, PS. Or if you want to talk about the taxation that they're doing under the banner of the G20 and the OECD. The whole budget seems to be just about taking money back, right? Clawing money back, which is, if you were listening to anybody when they were trying to implement all of these dollars that they were borrowing through their teeth on, they would have told you that taxation is what comes next. The government doesn't generate money. It only gets its money from people's working. So when those bills start to come due after many years, they start to say, well, we need you to give more, right? Whether it be what they call a little bit more or what they're calling it exorbitant amounts, they want it from you. They want all of it from you because they don't make the money themselves. Every last penny, every last dime, every last quarter, whatever you want to use, comes from you. And this budget is completely and totally about taxation. Now, before I get too far into it, I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with your friends. I have memberships if you want to join the channel and give it even more support. Some of these videos take a little bit of research to do. Okay, so this is a guy from the taxation department talking about how he specifically is working on section 2 of the budget, of this new budget. Let's listen.
Hello, I'm Peter Repetto, a senior director in the tax legislation division at the Department of Finance Canada, and I will be speaking about Part 2 of the bill. Part 2 is a proposed new act which would implement the global minimum tax known as Pillar 2 in Canada. And by way of background, Canada is one of 139 members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and G20 inclusive framework on base erosion and profit shifting that joined a two-pillar plan for international tax reform in 2021. Pillar 2 of that plan is a framework for a global minimum tax regime. The Pillar 2 rules are designed to ensure that the profits of large multinational businesses, which are those with annual revenues of at least 750 million euros, are subject to an effective tax rate of at least 15% in each jurisdiction in which they operate. This is intended to reduce the incentive for multinational businesses to shift their profits into low-tax jurisdictions and to set a floor on tax competition among countries. The government originally announced its intention to implement Pillar 2 in Budget 2022, and then in Budget 2023 set out the proposed implementation timeframe starting in 2024. As noted, the new Global Minimum Tax Act in Part 2 of the bill would implement Pillar 2 in Canada. More specifically, it contains legislation that would implement the primary Pillar 2 rule, known as the Income Inclusion Rule, or IIR, with effect for 2024. And generally under that rule, Canada would impose top-up tax on a Canadian headquartered multinational enterprise where its profits in a foreign country have an effective tax rate below the 15% minimum rate.
Okay, so that means that if you're a company that is located in Canada and you're making money in Costa Rica and the Costa Rican government isn't taxing you at 15%, Canada is going to top up the difference. So if they're taxing you at 11, we're putting 4% more on it.
This tax would bring the effective tax rate on those profits up to the 15% rate. The legislation would also implement a domestic minimum top-up tax in Canada, which would impose a top-up tax on a multinational enterprise where its Canadian profits have an effective tax rate below 15%. And this is also effective in 2024.
So what that means is that if we're in the example I just gave you, if we're the country that's only charging them like 10%, we now have the right to go in and charge them an extra 15%. Now, this implies this second step is important because this targets specifically headquartered companies that are Canadian. Now, they're going to come into it in a little bit, but what I don't like about this legislation is that this is part of the turning the world into one gigantic country. This, of course, is a ridiculous business model. And we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't already, if all of these countries that were following this same idea weren't hemorrhaging money. The only way that you make any money is you allow business to make money. And by that, they get to then give that money to people. Now, when you hear about it, when you're like, oh no, they're taking money from the poor countries. The reason that they're taking money from the poor countries is because those countries don't have any middle class. So they don't have any money to spend. Where North America has, and the West, the first world has a middle class. And the middle class is the only way that generates economy. It's the middle class that stimulates the economy. It's the middle class that makes the billions and trillions of dollars that they talk about. But they don't seem to understand that because they have an ideological focus on telling yourself that because you're rich, you owe the poor people something. You don't owe them anything. Now, the Conservatives understand that, so they went ahead and asked a couple of questions like, how is it that this budget is going to help? How is this Section 2 of the budget going to help the country earn any money, right? How is it going to help the GDP? So let's have a listen to what he says.
Thank you.
Part 2, how much will the implementation of Part 2 improve Canada's productivity?
I think that part 2 is we don't have specific numbers on that. It's a measure that is, as Peter explained, it's something that's being done on a global basis amongst our peers. So it's really about ensuring the competitiveness of Canada's tax system and Canadian companies, and ensuring that Canada can collect its appropriate share of tax in that context.
I understand it's not, its goal is not to increase productivity. I think
that's a fair statement.
Thank you.
So why is this legislation in the budget? Why are they trying to convince you that it's an important time to put it in there if it's not helping the current situation of the economy? Are they being driven by the needs of Canadians when they implement this, or are they being driven by somebody else? Is somebody else trying to tell them that it's time that we put that in place because we want that money to go somewhere? Where's that money going to go? That extra 15%. Why is the finance minister given carte blanche on how much money she can send to the International Monetary Fund, which is a video that I'm working on? So why would they be giving this? Why would they care? We got homelessness, we got hunger, we got all kinds of problems in this country. The fact that IBM might be making 4% extra on its income on its taxes, what does that mean to you? Does that mean anything to you?
What's the estimated number of Canadian? It's just so I understand it. It's Canadian companies that will be caught by this who are, sheltering profits in jurisdictions that have less than a 15% tax rate. So if you could correct that first, and then if you could also tell me how many Canadian companies you expect to be caught by this provision.
If I can just answer rapidly your previous question, we estimate there are around 200 Canadian multinationals that are above this 750 million euro threshold for being in scope of the global minimum tax.
750 million euros as they make this is about 1.1 billion Canadian dollars. So there's about 200 companies in Canada that are making 1.1 billion dollars, and somehow they're hiding their money somewhere else. I just feel like if the company was smart, they would be taking a different tactic, right? They would be buying the people off. It's better for them to say that we made a donation of $4 million to 3 local hospitals anonymously so that they could hire 3 or 4 doctors from another country than to say, here's more tax money to the government that's only going to spend the money in Ukraine. And we don't even know where that money's going, right? Because it all passes through the International Monetary Fund, which if I was anybody else, I would be calling it, they're washing that money. Why are they washing that money? Where's that money going once it's been washed? Why is it got it passed through 3 or 4 levels of hands? This is a tactic that certain aspects of society have been using since the beginning of taxation, right? Since they got Al Capone for it. You know what I mean? And I don't understand why we as Canadians are allowing this to be something that we're worried about. And we got the government running around the country right now talking about free lunch and free babysitting, daycare. And I think that we should be talking about the idea that if you want to have a company come here and keep the middle class going, then they should be able to generate all the money that they want. And we should not be, our children shouldn't be going to school hungry. If they are going to school hungry, the solution isn't to feed them food. The solution isn't more taxes. And absolutely, the solution is not to tell yourself that the companies that we do have in this country are now going to leave because we're going to implement more of a tax on them. I mean, in the end, the implementation of that tax, if those companies stay here, a company like, say, Bell, will now get all this extra tax put on them. And I don't know if Bell's one of them. I just know that Bell makes more than, $1 billion and that they're a Canadian company. They may be above board. They get a lot of tax breaks, so I don't know. So don't come at me. But what I'm saying is that if it's a company that makes a lot of money and that all of a sudden now that tax will pass to me and you, right? These guys go to business school. They don't go to ideological land. They're not lawyers. They're accountants. They're like, how can I make more money? How can I turn a profit? I need more money to come in for my shareholders. I need more money to come in so that I can buy that extra condominium and go for a speedboat ride on the lake. Don't tell Stephen Guilbeault because it's bad for the environment. And so why we would think that implementing a stronger tax regime on those companies is a bad idea. We should be telling ourselves, no, you can come on in. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it. As long as you're hiring local, there's better ways to make them pay. I tell you what you're going to do. You got to, if you want to come in and put a headquarters in our company, in our country, you have to make sure that you pay the salaries of 15 doctors. Like as examples, there's better ways for us to use their money than it is to give it to Chrystia Freeland, who, having read the document, I realized that that's what's happened. In three different locations in the document, it says that it can be, the amount that can be spent is left to the discretion of the finance minister. You want Chrystia Freeland in charge of how much money we can spend, how much money she can spend overseas, how much money she can send to the International Monetary Fund. Canadians are in a bad way. We got nowhere to live. They want to keep closing us in tighter and tighter in the second largest country in the world. Now the companies that do exist here that are flourishing, that are making money, they want to tax to more to make them leave. And when they leave, they take with them all their jobs. And when they take with them those jobs, they take with them all the spending that comes with those jobs. So this tax, this section number 2, they admit doesn't do anything to improve the GDP of Canada, but it does go after Canadian companies that are making money. I think that that's a little bit of a sideways attempt to convince you, the Canadian voter, that they're doing something that they're not. This entire budget seems to be all about taxation. Except for, I'll tell you the truth, man, in the amount of laws that they got to change to make this budget work. Whew. But that's a different video. All right, I'm going to wrap it here. I want to thank you all for listening. I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with your friends, join the memberships if you feel like you want to give the channel extra support. Either way, I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you next time.